actually, Jake the Snake. Here's one with Jake the Snake. Jake has turned his life around. You listen to these podcasts and stuff he does. Brilliant. Back in the day, not the case. He lived in England. He was probably, I'm not sure if he was still there when you would have been gone, I think, when you were in and around England. So he came in first. I think Andre Baker, who had HANNIBAL, I think he brought him in first and paid for his visa. And then it was Scott Conway and Brian Dixon. We worked for all these guys. That time, he was still, had these demons, as they say, alcohol and so forth. And he had a reputation of no-showing events, taking the deposit, no-showing. So I used Scott Conway on my shows in 2002 when I started going forward as a guy who would make sure Jake came along. And Jake had a habit of taking 2 bookings on the one day. Anyway, he turned up at the airport. I went with the driver to collect him, make sure everything was okay. Came out carrying a bottle of scotch, half drunk. He was fucking half drank, but he was drunk or locked, as we say. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And he got to the hotel. He was demanding this certain pizza. So I said to the guy, look, everybody else is going. You stay over here, look after him. We got back to the hotel that night and pizza was still there, everything he wanted, and he was what he was at the end of the night. I paid him his Polaroid money, didn't even check it. Anyway, backtrack a little bit. So he's on the show. I see the state he's in. And I was like, I can't put him in the main event. So I said I'd put him on prior to intermission. That way I can get him out of the building. He's gone. He had the snake. The guy who owned the snake, obviously, it's his snake, he didn't want any harm coming to it. And he gave strict instructions. Don't be tapping on the head. Don't do this. Don't do that. Jake, acting the bollocks drunk. Nobody tells me what to do. He goes out to have his match. Intoxicated, drunk. We had Flatliner. There's a guy in England back in the day called Flatliner. He was like a cheap version of the Road Warrior. Do you know Flatliner? I know him.
He's a nice guy, yeah.
Yeah, and he's hilarious as well. If you're around him, he's a really funny guy. So he went out and he's stomping out to the ring. Jake gets in. The guy who owns the snake, we'd agreed that the snake goes back. And then at the end of the match comes out. That way the snake's not in the bag anymore. And, you're looking after the snake. Jake forgets, throws a tantrum, jumps out of the ring and goes backstage. And in fairness to Flatliner, he got onto the crowd, cutting a promo, distracting them while I went back to get the snake to send the snake back out. Just a nightmare. He fell on the ground. He couldn't get up. Flatliner did a great job that night with him. But we had the match. After the match, then I had him do the Polaroids. He was getting ratty with the kids, and he was giving out in course. And I was just like, oh, Jason, had to cut the line off halfway through. Make good money out of it. What I used to do with the guys was, the likes of him, big names like that, I'd split it in half. I'd take half, and they'd take half. I'd provide the film. I'd provide the camera. So to me, all those people going away out of the queue, I was just like, that's money walking away. But he was an absolute nightmare to deal with. And for me as a kid growing up, seeing Jake the Snake and watching him, thinking, oh yeah, just 2 guys I've met who was very disappointed. And one was Finley and one was Jake the Snake. But look, anyone who's ever had an issue with alcohol or was an addict in any way, I've had a family member who was like that. It really takes over your life. And I know people can say, oh, well, still, they did what they did. They did, but under the influence. So it's nice to see that he's not like that way anymore. But you have to talk about these things because wrestlers don't like to talk about when they know show or what state you were in. But without talking about them, people can't learn from it. You shouldn't turn up to a show in that state and nobody wants the money to get whatever. But at the end of the day, you expect someone to be professional. But his life is turned around. God bless him.
I know around that time he killed 2 of the towns here, working for another promoter and showing up in those states, and they actually had good crowds. But because he was so screwed up and people had taken their kids and stuff, it took years for those towns to come back. Sadly, but is it true that he had some wealthy woman in England that he was living with during that time, and he used all of her money or something?
So I think it was Melanie. I think I was a lovely lady. I spoke to her on the phone a few times when you try to get hold of Jake. And I was going to bring Jake back the following year. Oh, yeah, the following year, but you talked to him on the phone, you're saying, here, it just goes a mess still. But seemed like a lovely lady, but apparently that's the stories I was told that he was, he took whatever. But then the story I was told by several promoters was that he wasn't taking care of his snakes that he had, the snakes died. And what's the group that looks after animals, whoever they are, were out to get him apparently, and that's why he had to leave England. I know he speaks very badly of his time in England, wrestling theatres and this and that, but that's the way it is. In Ireland, we've done plenty of theatres. We're just, Ireland's behind England, England's behind America when it comes to kind of that advancement, like, you know. So it was what it was.
I will say though, for the theaters compared to the US and Canada, you have like your own dressing room most of the time, or you're
Mm.
sharing it with 3 or 4 guys. They're clean. They're better than the dressing rooms here overall, but
But the only
I'm
people who
glad
work in the
Jake's being
theatre,
taken care of now. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say, with theatres, you really need good lads to know how to walk that one side of the audience. When we used to force the lads, we put headlocks on facing the back wall. So I used to start getting in there to rep to tell the lads, turn around, face the audience. No one on this U shape can see you or hear you. Like, but once the lads got used to that, it was great. So if you are doing a theatre show, or where the fans are just one side of the audience, people don't realise the importance of knowing how to face the crowd, because it's not about the crowd at the end of the day, like, you know. One last story on Jake. So we had the wrestling channel over here at the time, and the guy who ran that was a lad called Sean, an Irish guy, and he was a fan of Jake's as well. So, you know, Sean taped the original Irish Whip shows back in the day, and he was going to do a DVD with Jake, and it was going to be distributed and produced by the wrestling channel. So he had a few meetings with Jake over in England, but he had told me that Jake he wanted crazy money, and he was just making all these mad demands. And he was like, but look, we'll pay you a percentage, you'll make money out of this. And he was just like, I want this money, that money. And it never happened in the end, like, you know. So Jake would probably just think, like, get all this cash out of him and Bob's your uncle, like, off I go. But it didn't happen for him in the end. So I think it's just been greedy. But won't be like, unlike a wrestler, to be greedy now, like, you know. So I'm sure he's not alone there.
Now, I know you saw my recent interview with Brutus Beefcake where he said Jake tried to run a show and not pay people and Brutus threatened to walk out. Then he like tried to start a false rumor about Beefcake. Did you hear about any of these events that Jake
Yeah.
promoted?
So at the time, Jake had gotten a sponsor, somebody to fund these shows and best. He built a big 20-foot ring that went to waste, basically. Yeah. It actually ended up in Northern Ireland, I think. But that ring was built specifically for him and his training skill in those shows. It was too big a ring to be transferred around England and the venues. He brought in Honky Tonk, the Bushwhackers, Greg Valentine, Brutus Beefcake. And I remember I was actually thinking myself at the time of buying one of those shows off and putting it in Ireland. But the promoter over there said to me, no, do not do that. Like, you'll just have problems. So apparently some places got good houses, some got bad houses. And Jake was withholding pay on the lads, on the American talent. He wasn't giving them what he promised. And I watched an interview with Beefcake, and Beefcake had said how, you know, he was trying to get his money. Well, apparently that's what he'd heard. But Beefcake then in turn had trashed the hotel room. He fucking ruined the house, or as in the venue, the audience that were there. He caused all these problems, became a lunatic basically. And I got his money back by causing destruction. And then he left England. And then on your interview, he said no such thing happened. So it's just crazy the way rumors get started in wrestling, isn't it? And then believed.
Yeah. I know Brutus has a partying side, but he's always been caught like he's not a crazy drunk or a sloppy drunk. He's always fairly mellow. So I actually believe more Brutus on that.